Tim's getting.
There we go, Scott. We're up and running.
Okay, great. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to share with you a couple of the flies, and I'll explain a little bit about the fly and some of the history. And I'm from New Hampshire. I live in New Hampshire right now. New Hampshire is in New England. I'm about 2.5 hours from Boston and north of Boston, and we're right in the mountains, and we don't have any fishing right now. We're waiting for the ice to get about 4 inches thick, and then we're going to fish with for ice fishing. But once the spring hits in April, the ice breaks up and it starts to go out, and for about a month there are the landlocked salmon in the big river and the big lakes will be right on the surface. They'll be within 4 inches of the surface, and many times they're in water that's no more than 6 or 8 feet deep, and you could be right next to the shore, and you can cast a fly or you can troll. We troll flies, and the flies I'm going to show you tonight are both for landlocked salmon and for trout. So I'm going to do this one first. It's called the May Morning, and I think it got its name May Morning because over here on some mornings it gets to be kind of almost like an orange and light blue sky, and it kind of is a little bit of a overcast, but it definitely is usually a good day to fish. So I'm gonna tie on a partridge 10X Carrie Stevens historic reproduction hook. They're a little bit longer. Usually we troll either tandems with 2 hooks, or what we do is we use a 9X or 7X, usually size 2 to size 4. And with streamers, typically you want to kind of like, if you're probably all very familiar with classic salmon tying flies, that we use white or primrose thread underneath the body, just in case we're using a floss that's light. When it gets wet, we don't want a dark thread to show through it. So I always use the white thread. It always works better, even though I'm going to put a tinsel body on this one. One of the things that there was a woman named Carrie Stevens, and she's the woman who developed the gray ghost and a million patterns similar to that. And she was in Rangeley, Maine, and she did all of these streamers, many of them that are still used today, all tied them by hand, in hand, never had a vise. She was a hat maker, and she, knew how to manipulate feathers. And one day her husband was a guide, and one day she made a couple flies for him to use, and they were very effective. And then it turned into a business for her. And she did a lot of patterns that are used today still, and they're all smelt. Smelt are a bait fish that we have over here, and the smelt run in the spring, and that's what the salmon really key on. So it's a lot of fun to catch them. So what I do is I get this thread on, get a nice base. And if you look, one of the things I'm going to talk to you about tonight is something I call shingling. A lot of people, when they tie a streamer, they up at the business end where your leader's going to go through the eye, they start so close to the eye, and they tie in so many materials that either the materials, once you're done, you can take your fingers and roll them. They're not in they're just bound up on top of each other. They don't have a solid base foundation. And so what I do is I do this method of shingling, where each piece of material gets moved a little forward as I'm building the fly. And you'll see, a lot of people will be like, whoa, that's where I started my thread. You started your thread way behind the return on the loop eye. And I just say to them, hey, you watch, because when you build this, it'll come out a lot better. And then this is just a little technique I use. And if I don't explain it, someone's going to ask me. What I do when I'm going to have a body, I want the silver side of the tinsel to show. So what I do is I take the short end, the tag end of the tinsel, and I point it towards the rear of the hook. I reach around my thread and I grab the tag end, and then I cradle my thread just like that. I sandwich the gold sides, the side I don't want to show, together with my left hand, and then I just rotate the whole piece of tinsel to the far side of the hook, and then I pull the thread towards me. I've got that all tucked in. I don't have to make multiple wraps. I don't have to cut angles. This is just an easy way. And then I can just start winding forward and binding that tinsel in on your side, which is the far side of the hook, the side that you're looking at. And I just bind it in. And I like to open the thread fibers up. The company Danville, if you're familiar with Danville thread, they're not far from me. They're based in New Hampshire here. And so they're a family-owned business, and they don't cut anybody a deal. So I don't get a deal. I have to pay just what everyone else does for their thread. But because they're in New Hampshire, I try to use it. The thread that I'm using, it opens right up, and it's pretty durable. Most of the old time, like the Carrie Stevens tires, when they tied, they would use 3/0 thread, which it was very thick. And that's why you see some of those old flies, they have these mammoth heads on them. And that was just because they didn't have thread that was the diameter was less. So then once I have it in, then all I'm going to do is I take one wrap that's half on the bare shank and half on the thread. And then I just start to wrap forward with just slight overlapping wraps. And this is depending upon what company you would get your Mylar from, this is what we would call 14 or medium over here. You could use 10 and you would cover a lot of ground a lot quicker, but I don't know. I like the 14, so I just use it. I'm real old fashioned when it comes to this stuff. And I have a rotary vise, and usually somebody will ask me, why don't you use the rotary function on your vise? And I think I can, by the time I tie off and set up the cradle for the bobbin, I've got this bloody thing done, so I don't even bother with it. You just got to check every once in a while, make sure you're not having a holiday somewhere. And then as I get it close, I will just get ready to tie it off. And some streamers, they'll start at the head and they'll go all the way down and then reverse and come back because they want double coverage. Because the landlocked salmons over here, they have teeth like you wouldn't believe. So they love to hammer the body and take it right away from you. So what I always do now is I if I had a floss body or a tinsel body, I always do a 2-turn whip finish. Just, it makes sure that as I add more materials, I'm not gonna mess anything up. All right, so let me see, let me just make sure. So now we're gonna put a belly in, and the first material for the belly is pink bucktail. And when you're tying streamers, you typically, where my hands are, that's the meat. Those are the bucktail hairs that you want to use. They have some nice ones up here, but the tips often break easy. So usually you try to get them from, not too low, about midsection. And one of the things that is really important when you're dealing with these streamers is that you less is more. If you think you have too much, you have way too much material. If you are classic salmon fly tires, you know that drill. You don't want to have more of anything than that you need. And so I stack them, and then I get the shorts out. And then if you look, you'll see it kind of, they're all bunched up. What I like to do is I like to just roll them. And if anything is got hanging on a left-hand turn, I'll just pull it out. Once I roll it, because it's a belly, I'll go on the bottom side, and I want this to extend just a little bit past the bend. Sure, a couple of those. Then what I do is I reach in and I snip, and then I'm just going to take 3 loose turns and then adjust, take a look, make sure they're where I want them. And then I'm going to bind these in with tighter turns going forward. And then I come back right to where those 3 turns were, and I leave my thread, because the next material is going to layer over that and be tied in a little bit further than where the pink bucktail was tied in. So that's the shingling piece. So now I'll take the second belly. All the smelt have a white belly. All the bait fish have a white belly. So very, very often the belly of one of these big streamers is going to be white bucktail. And we have a lot of deer in our state, and so we can get the white bucktail. The hunters will shoot them and they'll save them, and we dry them out. A lot of what you're going to see tonight is locally sourced. The mallard, the wood duck. Do you have wood duck over there?
No.
All right. So about this, what I do with the white bucktail is I put it on a little bit more than the pink. So there might be like maybe 8 or 9 fibers more, and then I lay that in there. And then I'm going to take, this is a Minwax varnish, and I just hit the bucktail with that. Just give it a little bit of a adhesive there, and it'll set while I'm getting ready to do the next piece. So now, as I'm moving along the bottom, I got to also add to the top. So what I'm going to do is the next part of this is about, it says 4 to 6 peacock curls. And as you all know, peacock curls can be either really good or really bad. And we'll give these a try here. I'll put in 4. we buy them in these big lots where they're 60 inches long. And then I cut them down in like 3 sections. And but it depends. If the bird's had a good life, then it's got the tips have points. If the bird hasn't had a good life, then and it got beat up by its buddies, then the tips are all broken. So we use those for trout nymphs and bodies and things like that. Okay, so then I'll lay these on the top. Couple turns. And I'll tell you what the guys that sell these flies in frames and online, what they do is they run the bucktail through a woman's hair straightener. And it's like an iron, and they iron the bucktail so it's straight and has no curl. If you ever see a fly online for somebody that it just, everything's perfect, that's what they did with the bucktail. All right, so now we got hey, there in Germany they use that. Yeah.
I knew he'd have one.
Oh, of course he did. Yeah. So the peacock curl acts as what we call a lateral line, like you would see in a fish. In a lot of fish, they have that lateral line that's got coloring, and that's what the peacock curl gives you. All right, so now I've got a lot still going on the bottom. So I'm going to add a golden pheasant crest. And let's see if I got one that's straighter. What I tried to do the other day was straighten a bunch of them out. Mostly when you put on golden pheasant crest, you want them to have a pretty dramatic curve. But for this pattern, yeah, there's one right there. For this pattern, we want it to be somewhat straight. And we want it to almost go to the point of the hook. So what I do is just get the trash off of it. And I use a needle nose plier that doesn't have any serrations. It's flat inside. And I just crimp and flatten the stem where I'm going to tie it in. And then I'm going to just lay it in the eye of the hook. Get it in place. Couple, 2 or 3 wraps. And that's perfect. And then usually what I'm going to do is just snip that. Try my new Sprite scissors. I'm testing them out today. I just got them. Yeah, nice razor scissors. They work pretty good. And then I'm going to go back and hit it again with a little bit of varnish, just to make it like construction better. All right, now let's see. Let me make sure I got everything. Yep. Okay, so now we're going to go with saddles. We're going to put some feathers, the long feathers on the top. And I was talking to Derek earlier today and explaining in the next fly, I'm going to show you some really interesting colors, but this one has a inside wing of orange and an outside wing of the light blue. And so when I take one, I want to take one from one side and one from the other. And I try to just, there's a good one right there. These are really long and really nice. There's one. And one for the other side. You just try to find the if you get one from one side, you try to get it from the opposite side about the same spot. There we go. And I keep, then when I take them from the orange one here, this one's kind of really bright orange. There we go. I mean, these are good 7-8 inches long. Okay. All right, so I got one from each side. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my bodkin and I wanna size the feather up. And I want it to be a little bit, maybe a gap to a little more than a gap past the bend of the hook. Now, if I was going to cast this and not troll it, I might make it a little shorter, because what I wouldn't want to have happen is I don't want this to wrap under the hook when you're casting and foul, because then when you bring it in, it won't look like a smell. So I take off the garbage there in the end. And then what I come up with is this, maybe a 1/2 inch to 1 inch long stem. Okay, really just a little bit there. And then that's my template. So now I'm going to just quickly go to all 4, 3 remaining, and just make them exactly the same length. And there are some, like the next fly I'm going to tie, it has 3 feathers each side. This only has 2. There's one pattern that I like, has 4 feathers on each side. So you got a lot of material there. You got to make sure that you have them all sized the right way, and that you also have them so that they're not gonna, when you tie them in, they're not gonna work against each other and then end up not laying down the right way. And then there's a trick. It's not a trick, but they used to, the woman that Carrie Stevens, she would glue all these with her head cement, with her varnish or whatever she was using. She would glue every single part. Like I said, she didn't have a vise, so she was tying in hand, and so she had to have all the parts glued. And we glue them too, as well, but a different way. I do it a different way. There are several ways to do it. So these flies we would call Rangeley flies, flies that are from the region Rangeley, Maine. The ghost flies, like the gray ghost, when the wings are tied on them, they're tied on a little bit on the side, like a 10 and 2. And with the Rangeley patterns, like I'm tying tonight, they're tied right on top. So there's some things you have to do when you tie them on the side, slightly different. So what I use to glue them is this stuff here, Tear Repair. And it's a latex based adhesive. And what I do, and I'll show you, I just dip my bodkin in and just put a little bit on the end of the stem, right on that stem. And then I get my outer feather, the blue one, line the tips up, and then I just tap them and let them set for a second. And then I do the same with the other side. And people agonize over getting their wings perfect. And, they may have a slight bend in them and things like that. Once they get wet, it doesn't matter. They look perfect. Now, if you're trying to get them in the frame, different story. So, okay, so now that's gonna drop and it doesn't take very long. So while it's drying, I'm gonna add a few other things here. I'm gonna work on the throat, and the first level of the throat is white hen or white schlappen, whatever you want to use, and I'm gonna lay that on the bottom. And sometimes I like to build. So if you were watching, I put 2 wraps on. Now I'm gonna put 2 more and just build a little bit more of this schlappen on. And what this is gonna do is when we mount the wing, it's gonna help keep that wing from twisting and curving when we put it in place. And so here we go, we'll put it in place. Gonna line these tips up.
Customer for you.
Take the wing,
Open gold original brooch pin.
put about 3 wraps on. And there we go. Look at that wing. Look how that's all lined up. Nice. Make any final adjustments. You can look at, that's the top. See how it's laying there? So it's right in place, right where I want it. It's got a nice curve. And then I'm gonna finish up and finish by building. I'm gonna switch thread because I want to use the black thread. So I'll lay that in and do some trimming. This is usually when I cut my thread and not the one that I wanted to cut. All right, now we got it in place. Make sure everything looks good. And now the next material that I'm going to use is,
Sorry, Scott.
yep.
Before I do the next step, which kind of action does the schlappen in the belly section perform to help you? Putting the schlappen or the feathers on top, because I can only see that the schlappen is on the belly section and
Right. Well, when I get ready to put the next piece on, which are these shoulders, it's going to help keep that nice and flat against the wing and the schlappen on the bottom.
Okay, so the schlappen does not help the wing stay in place.
No. Now, if we were doing a ghost where we were doing 10 and 2, we would put schlappen on the top and on the bottom. And that would, because we're going to come along and you actually, when you do a ghost, you don't see the body. The feathers cover the body. Does that make sense? All right. So then I'm going to take this, this is orange dyed mallard that I actually dyed myself. And see how that pins up against the schlappen on the bottom and the wing on the top. If I didn't do that, it would curve right around. So now we have that in the shoulder in place. And now what we're going to do is, just get it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add schlappen to the top and to the bottom, an upper and a lower throat. This pattern was designed by a tyer named Mike Martinique, and Mike was known for putting schlappen on the top, so he had an upper and a lower throat. He would do that because it provided the fish with a real almost like a trigger, a hot spot, like you would have with a nymph. And if you're, every once in a while, the shoulders kind of need to be adjusted. Okay, that's good.
Scott, Mike Martinet came over here in 2016.
Yeah, how you like that?
I-
Big guy. That he's a really unique individual. He passed away like 3 years ago. He was kind of got pretty sick, and but he used to live in Massachusetts, and he went all over the place doing fly tying instruction. So there you have your upper and lower throat, and then somewhere here, there they are. I got my jungle cock. So here, I fixed my jungle cock. They were split. We have a hard time getting any jungle cock that's any good here. And anything that's any good's come from some auction they got from over in your neck of the woods, and they're reselling it over here. So it's hard to get these. They are breeding them, but they're hard to breed them over here. So what I do with the splits is I use this stuff called Dave's Flex Cement. I put a little Flex Cement on the back, and I drag my fingers across the jungle cock, and it tries to fix the split. Now, what I do when I'm getting ready to put the jungle cock on is I use this stuff here. It's called fabric fusion, and you get it at the, this is what they when they put patches on clothes, when they are repairing somebody's jacket, they use this. It dries completely clear, and the only reason that I use this is because it provides a little more strength to this jungle cock, and it's going to hopefully hold up a little longer. So now I've got it all, the fly's built the way I want it, and now it's time to kind of start doing my trimming. So I'm just going to reach in and I try to trim this in reverse. If you go in and try to machete this down and hack it completely off, then you're going to end up moving some of the pieces that you tied in, and you don't want to do that.
I bet your desk's gonna look a mess in a minute.
Yeah, at least I'm not spinning deer hair. Okay, I think I got it all. As always, one. Okay, now maybe one more trim here with the real fine scissors. There we go. All right, then when you do this for the streamers, you start at the front and you work back to make the head. So now, remember all the material that I used? Look at the size of that head. It's tiny. That's because we used that shingling method moving forward. And that's the key part. And the materials are in there good. All I got to do is do a nice little whip finish. I do 2 of them. Trim it, and then I get the old head cement on there. And there you have it. And some people use and I use it sometimes too, is the resin on the heads. We have the resin over here. It's the company that makes the surfboards called Solaris. They have a real thin resin that you heat up and it dries. The problem with the resin is, as a tire, you have to be careful. You can't heat it up too fast because the solvent will all come in your face, and then you'll look like you have a sunburn after 2 flies. So you have to really be careful. And so with this, I'm gonna probably put the head cement on it, maybe 3 or 4 coats. And then it'll be good. Hey, anybody have any questions?
Beautiful, beautiful.
There you go.
Yeah,
All right,
beautiful.
now,
Can you tell me the name again, Scott?
that one's called the May Morning. If you look at, I don't know if you'll find it. It was written in some materials that Mike Martinique wrote. He used to have these little books that he would sell.
No, I can't find it in this one here, but it's a
Oh, yeah.
basic, it's a
Finding
basic
that
book.
Yeah, that one's got, you know what's really good? This is really the best one on streamers. This one here, the Carrie Stevens book. It's got all the history and it's got all the patterns, and these guys took some of the info from the book you have and took some of the info out of here and used it.
Yeah, maybe you can send me the ISBN number.
Yeah, I will.
afterwards.
Well, yep, perfect. Okay, so let's switch gears here and let's do, this is one of my patterns.
This is one of Mike Martinek's books.
Yeah, that's it. It's, it might be in that. Look and see. That might be in there, May Morning.
It isn't. I've had a look. It isn't in this one.
No, it's in this one here.
This says volume 2.
Yeah, volume 1 was paperback. This is volume 1 right there. And it was white, green, or pink. And there's very few pictures in there. So, all right, so I'm gonna do a pattern that is one of mine. We have game wardens over here that they're the guys and women that control the fish and the hunting and all the rules and regulations. And one of my friends is a retired game warden. And so I named this fly the Ossippee Warden because he lives in Ossippee. So he needed to have some history. So I gave him some history. And the cool part about this are the feathers. So I will tell you the story. Let me get same drill. When I teach classes, I usually tell them we start the thread 2 wooden matchsticks behind the eye of the hook. That's my landmark for them. And then I just go back. Not many people do these anymore. They, I don't know why they don't want to do them. And it's hard to find the feathers. The companies that make the feathers, they've overbred some of the birds, and they've lost, some of the stems have gotten very, very thick, and you don't get the action from the fly that you want. Okay, we get this back, and usually with these, when I fish them, I bend the barbs down. So the salmon, the landlocked salmon here have very weak jaws, soft. And they have to be 15 inches long to keep them. And so if you're going to keep a fish, and so if you get a short, you can't, you don't want to hurt it and put it back in the water. So usually what I do, my landmark where I stop my thread is halfway between the point and the bar. And then on this one up here, the color copper is really, really big for trout, really big. So anything with a copper body is something that the fish will like. So it's the same drill, only this is copper on both sides, so I don't have to worry about which side's which. And if you look at some of the patterns, like a gray ghost, it's got a green, it's got a orange body. Alice, I don't have a thread rack like Vigo, so I only have one. So, but this is the actual color that Carrie Stevens used on her gray ghost. It's a little bit lighter orange, and if you look at that when it gets wet, it darkens up. It's almost the same color as copper. And one of the things that's very interesting is that there was a shift to using the tinsel as bodies and not the floss, because the floss doesn't last as long on when you fish it. If you've caught 2 or 3 fish, the floss is going to get all eaten up and not going to look good. So, and this is embossed gold, copper. I don't know. I don't know what you guys use over there, but we have flat copper. One side's blue, and the other side's copper. It's awful. It separates when you put it on if you put too much tension on it.
Yeah.
Junk.
Yeah.
I think Uni makes it, or I don't know.
It is, yeah, uni.
Yeah, it's too bad. They used to have solid every once in a while. Somebody dies. That grandfather dies that was an old time fly tire, and they'll call me and say, "Oh, I got all this material," and you know the floss is no good because it's dried out, and every once in a while you get like the old wooden spools from France of the good tinsel.
Long-a-ton.
And I edge butt these. I don't try to really overlap these. I just try to edge butt these.
Is this your favorite hook that you use for mostly every pattern you tie, or?
I like the hook I used at the beginning was a reproduction 10X Carrie Stevens Partridge. This one is just a regular heritage streamer hook from Partridge. I might go 7X on these too, so a little shorter. If I'm casting, I'm going to go 7X. If I'm trolling, I'm going to go 9X, which this is. I really like these hooks. So, and I evidently Mustad's not going to make any more of their long hooks. I don't use those, but that typically is what we get over here. The Partridge is not as popular over here. I guess it's part of my ambassador's role to get it more popular. All right, same thing. Get it on, 2-turn whip. And as usual, the sharpness of the emboss likes to run havoc with your thread. Okay, now let's see what I got here. Okay, the body on this one of the things that we kind of like to do on our own flies is use the Peacock Curl lateral line on the bottom, it helps protect it a little bit. Because the bucktail, that's going to be the underbelly on this one, is going to give it a little more protection.
Can you shortly explain me how you troll your flies?
Yeah, so we will get in a boat or canoe with a motor, and we have fly line. It's 90-foot long, level fly line, so there's no taper to it. And what we do is the boat goes at a very small speed, and we let the line out. And usually in the backwash from the motor, right where the backwash ends, we put the flies out like that, and we take and we keep working the rod like this, and the
Okay.
salmon will come right up, and they'll get right up next to the flies, and they'll be right there, like inches away from the fly with the water, and they'll come around and they'll hammer the front of the fly, and you just sit there and be patient. And they think they've injured it, and then they circle around back, and then they attack it from the rear, and then it's a dance show in the air. They come right out of the water, and 5 or 6 times before you get them to the boat. If you get a brook trout, they'll hammer it right away, and they'll go right down the bottom. Or a lake trout or a rainbow. Rainbows will sometimes, if the water's not too cold, the rainbows will actually, I got this a little too long. The rainbows will actually, they'll come out of the water and jump too. But the brook trout won't, the brown trout won't. They stay down the bottom. Okay, so
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome. Trolling is a big thing. And then when it gets warm, when the water warms up, they have these downriggers that take the lines down, and then they troll the flies down too. Okay, so the next, like I said, the belly of most bait fish is white. So I'm going to take a little bit of white bucktail. And the big mouth stackers are perfect.
But you didn't do that at the main morning, stacking the
No,
bucktail.
the May morning, because that's not my pattern, the May morning. And they put the Peacock Curl on the top. Now, as Martinique fished more, he started to change some of his patterns. So he had floss bodies, and he had Peacock Curl on the top, and then he eventually moved it down on the bottom on many of his patterns. They evolve. All right, and then I get that in and lay a little of the head cement in. All right, now. Okay, now, so I was explaining to you about the feathers. So about 3 years ago, this company Ewing came to me and asked me if they could use my name on the feathers. So they put my name on the feather pack. And I said, yep. And I said, oh, I want to pick the colors. And so what I did was I picked 20 colors. Now we have like 40. And I don't know how well you can see this, but this is a yellow, and it's got a slight bit of red coloring in it, just a little bit. I think you could refer to it as sunburst almost. So they went out and they sent me all these feathers with the colors, and some of them were right. Some of them I had to send back and say, go back, dye it a little bit different. And now there's a whole line of feathers that they sell under my name. I don't make any money from it either, too. I don't know, I'm stupid, but and then here, this one's even cooler. This is a really cool. So we take a let me get you one to show you. I brought it. We take a grizzly and we bleach it. Okay, so it's like a tan color. And then we bleached it. And on this one, we threw it a little olive dye in. And this is really a very cool color, because what it did was the barring is kind of olive. And I go to bed every night and I pray that they'll be able to redo this one. I don't know if they'll ever be able to get it exactly the same color, but I have a couple. So, and then the last, the outside wing on this is just regular olive. And then it's pretty much the same drill. And you're all probably really aware of the fact that when you have grizzly stems, they're a little bit thicker than the stems from the regular white roosters. So you have to kind of factor that in when you're building these. And like I didn't mention this in the last one, but I did say, I cut them about an inch. And the reason I cut them about an inch long is because if you leave them full length, just strip the waist off, when you tie them in, they will work against each other. They will actually try to cross several times away from the eye of the hook, and it can make mounting your wings, make your hair hurt while you're trying to mount your wings, and you don't want that to happen. What, Martinique didn't drink all your booze over there when he came over?
No, I don't think so. Very pleasurable chap. Signed my book for me. He came to the fly fair, and then he came to a club I'm in, the Potteries Fly Tyers Club, and did a demo.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was near the end, he was a pretty big drinker. I think that's what was his demise. And he actually, what's kind of interesting was the company, the feather company, Ewing, actually had a line of feathers under his name. And then he had a falling out with the owner, and they stopped it. And it was stopped long before I got involved. But they said that they had a lot of success selling things under his name. They should. The guy was an excellent fly tyer.
What was the Gary Stevens book called again, please?
It's called Carrie Stevens, maker of Rangeley favorite trout and salmon. It's written by Graydon Hilliard, Hilyard. I'll post it after I'm off. But it's if you go on, I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. You can probably get it used too. They're
137 quid, Derek.
How much?
137 quid.
No.
Yeah. There's only one.
No.
I
Wait,
saw-
on?
If you search for Carrie Stevens, though, you get a centerfold. She's quite a hot model.
Trust him. What at all? What?
I think she got an audio book. She has. She's quite a racy bird. Like so. That might be more your
That's
speed,
ugly.
Derek.
It comes in a round,
No,
package, Derek, just in case when it comes to your door.
We're 137 today there.
Okay, so then, so we have the yellow red on the inside. The olive grizzly in the middle. And then the olive on the outside. So the book that Alice has, there was some copyright infringement with that. And when it came out, there was a big to-do over here about it. I don't know all the whole story, but there was a big to-do, and they had to sell it on, they were selling it on Amazon for $4 because that was the only way that they could, with the copyright, there was some deal that was made. Like I said, I don't know the whole story, but it was kind of interesting. And the woman who wrote the book, she used to tie a lot at events. I've never seen her after that whole thing went down. But she was a really good tire. And one of the tricks with using the tear mender is if you're using it, always take your bodkin and clean the bodkin off. I have a stainless steel material in a little holder, and it cleans it, because the latex on this will really thicken up quick, and then you'll have all this glue where you want to tie it in. You don't want that. All right, so then what we're going to do here is we're going to add a couple pieces of material. I had it all lined up and I knew it would start. It's dropping all over the place on me. So with the bait fish, one of the things that is really good with these patterns is to put a little bit of red at the throat on the underside that look like the gills. So put a little red. And just a little bit more. Okay, and then we'll get the wings on. Line up the tips. Looking good. Now, another little trick is if they separate when you mount them, if they separate right between the three on the inside, what you can do is back it off, take it off, separate them, and then just put a little dab of the tear mender on one of the inside stems, and then put your fingers up, tie it in, and then just squeeze it after you've got it in the spot you want, and that'll set the wings right in place. So that's I'll tell you that, I tell my classes, that's a high level tip. It's a high level tip. And then I'm gonna switch here to yellow, because I'm gonna use yellow and red to finish this off.
That tearmender stuff. I wonder, would copy decks do the same job?
What is it?
Copy decks. They use it for carpets. You know, when they cut the edge of a carpet, it's like a glue, and
Is
it
it-
binds the carpet together.
Is it water? Is it like latex based, like
Yeah.
water? It might work.
Yeah.
We use this forever, but I find that it just doesn't have enough tack. But when they originally did them, they used they would take the varnish and they would open the can, the bottle of varnish, and they would get it so it was like syrup. You know, it was really thick, and that would be the one that they used to glue. The problem with that is, if you get any on the feather, on the fibers, then it you know, and these flies, they move like crazy in the water. So, all right, so I got let's see, I gotta find the shoulder. Here we are. So the shoulder on this one is lemon wood duck. And I have a bunch of people, they go and hunt and they get me the wood duck because this stuff is very expensive. And one of the key things to streamer building is not have a shoulder that is too big. So this is about a little under a third of the wing, which is what I want. See that? Look at the barring on that wood duck. Okay, really nice there. Now, I'm gonna have I still got a couple pieces to put on. I'm gonna have another piece. I'm gonna have an upper and a lower throat on this. It's gonna be olive hen. So I try to find a big old webby feather. And just get off the crap from the bottom. And then I pull the fibers up so the tips are lined up. And I put a little bit of an upper throat. And then I put a little bit of a throat underneath it. Sometimes the throat underneath needs to be a little bit extra to cover the red. I want that red to kind of bleed through when it gets wet. But olive is olive, copper, orange. Those are the real big colors we find around here that are really good for trout. And when I should have said this when I tied it in, but when I tie the wood duck in, I try to grab like maybe 2 fibers where I've cleaned it off. I try to grab the first 2 fibers that really kind of locks it in the right spot. And then I put the jungle cock on. And I tell you funny, so just as many of these flies are tied with jungle cock as tied without any and tied with a painted eye. So they would make a little bit bigger head, and they would take some paint, acrylic paint, and they would paint a white pupil, a white iris, and then a black pupil, or a red and yellow. They have all different. And so a bunch of my buddies were fishing, and I tied them some flies, and I said, okay, I tied them one with no eye, one with a jungle cock, and then one with a painted eye. And after the year finished, they said to me that the most fish they caught were on the painted eye. The eye that didn't have anything was second, and then the jungle cock was third. But you could not sell a fisherman a fly in many cases without that jungle cock on. And then the same trimming goes. Over here, I was telling Derek, I teach fly tying classes. We give them free. The state Fish and Game, the division that manages the fish and the hunting, they get money from the federal government for every hour that I volunteer. And then every hook, every fishing rod, you name it, that's bought. We had a president here named Teddy Roosevelt. He was a big outdoors guy. And he put a law in that every time somebody goes and buys a hook or a bullet, a gun, anything that would be used for hunting or fishing, in each state, there's a tax on those items they buy, a small tax. It's built in. You don't even know when you pay it. And that money is set aside by state, and a percentage of that money goes back to the Fish and Game Department to manage the resource. And so I teach classes, and the materials are all paid for. We usually have a class of 12, and we have we've got nice vices that they use, and we do about 100 people a year. We teach about 100 people a year. And I was telling Derek, every fall I have an alumni class. They all come back, and they're all, show you how well they've learned over the summer. And we have intermediate classes. It's crazy. And it keeps the fly shops in business, because people, if they didn't have something like that, how people start tying flies and then they just stop. They never do it again. They lose interest, and you got to keep their interest up. So this one, I put a little red band on the yellow. It's the tiny one. Let me just make sure on the other side how we look on there. I gotta cover that one piece.
Like an additional trigger point.
Yeah. The fish, they like to lock on to something. Some of those nymphs that in the last week, when some of those patterns, we would over here, we would right behind the head, we might take really bright orange thread and just put a extra make the head just look a little bit longer and just an extra trigger point. I don't know, the fish like it. Somehow it gets them all hot and bothered, and they got to hit it. But we always say in the end, you know, the fly can look great, but in the end, it's up to the fish. It's not how good it looks. There was a real historic fly tyer in New Hampshire. His name was Jim Warner. He did a lot of streamers with Marabou. He's dead now, but he used to tell a story. He said, this guy come into his shop, and here in the States, they used to have these big boards on the wall, and they would have all these streamers in little bags, cardboard with a bag, and they had just streamers. Different people would look at them and they pick the streamers off the board, and then they pay for them. Says this guy comes in, he looks up and down the board, and he finds what Jim said was probably the best gray ghost that there was on that board. He took it, opened the package up, put it down on the floor, and took his foot and ground it into the floor on the feathers. And then he pulled it out and he said, now that's a gray ghost. And he paid him, and the shop was right on the water and on Big Lake, Winnipesaukee. He said the guy wasn't 20 yards offshore trolling and he already had a fish. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is actually that the smelt are smart. They'll take injured fish because they don't have to work. They don't spend as many calories going after them. So, so that thing was, you know, probably not tracking really well in the water. The one thing that you have to be careful with streamers is that if there's anything offset when they're tied, when they get in the water, they'll actually spin in a circle as you're trolling them or as you're bringing them in with your line by hand. So what you can do to fix that is you just take your fly in your hand and you bend it, the shank, just a little bit one way, and then put it back in the water. And if it tracks, you're good. You guess the right way, which way to bend it. If it still spins, then it means you got to just bend it a little bit the other way, and it'll work perfect. So so there you go. Those are two Rangeley flies. This one more brook trouty, the other one more landlocked salmon. This would catch rainbow and brown trout in the fall or in the summer when the water gets warmer. You could take these and get sinking line and drop them down into the stream really low where the water was colder. The brook trout here, they don't like the water above 60. The rainbow they'll allow the water to be maybe up as high as 70, but anything over that, the oxygen just drops and they'll die. The bass, you have smallmouth bass and largemouth bass and perch and different things like that. They can handle that upper level, but the trout, they can't handle it. So you need the water. It's got to be moving. We have a lot of mountains here, and we get a lot of snow. And sometimes the snow doesn't melt until July. So it's draining down and the streams stay cold. And then right when you get to August, it changes. The days start to shorten enough that it gets cooler at night and it drops the water temperature down and the fish get active again. So it can be too cold to fish. The water can be too cold to fish, and the water can be too warm. And the bad side on the warm water is it'll kill them. And I'm sure you experience the same thing. I mean, these things are not, it's not rocket science. So do you have any questions?
How precisely do you tie your streamers which you gonna fish? You said the best gray ghost is looks like an injured fish. So when I have a look at your tying, it's when you flip the vise, it's kind of the same each side. When I would tie this, you know, I think my gill plates would look like I don't know, like an airplane, you know, how important is it to tie it correctly?
So if you're gonna just straight fish the fly yourself, it's probably not, it's limited in how perfect it needs to look. If it's something you're trying to sell, they will touch anything that looks odd. The anglers are looking for, they're looking for what's in the book, what they saw in the book,
Yeah.
right? But if you looked at Carrie Stevens' flies, the ones she tied, you would be shocked at how rough a fly that she tied, how the components were all in there, but it was a rough tie. That my head is small. In the 70s, in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 40s, in the 20s, those streamer heads were huge. And then all of a sudden, there was this trend in the 80s to get streamer heads tiny. And so everything shifted. And now no one would touch a fly with a big head. But if I had one of her flies, I have some historic flies that I own. I don't have any of hers, but I have some historic flies. The heads on them are so big, so the moral of the story is, if the colors and the components are right, you're probably going to be okay fishing it. What you don't want to have is if you have airplane wings, then it might not look like a fish in the water. It's got to still look like a fish. And you could take it and wet it. If I wet this, this thing will come right down. It'll be narrower than this when it gets wet. There's nothing to them. They're just this little tiny slip in the water. And it's all the colors that blend in and the action that this has going back and forth in the water. It looks like a fish swimming. So if something's really out of whack, it's not going to give it that action.
Mm.
And, there's some flies. I think I have one right here. Let's see if I can find it. Oh yeah, here's one here. This one's called Blood and Guts. This one here is the majority of the feathers of this are golden pheasant. Okay, crest, just and a little crystal flash. There's nothing to that when it's wet. Look at it, it's tiny.
Mm.
It's just that coloring and the action of the wing in the water that really gets the fish excited to eat it. And a lot of it is matching it, like these have the par marks in it. The grizzly gives it the par marks, and the par marks, if it didn't have par marks in it, it would be hard to get the trout to really like it. But there are times when we will take a fly like this, often with a white wing, and we will take it and tie it with only the feathers on one side, the other side, no wing. And we will lay it out on the surface of the river and let it float on top like it's an injured fish. And every once in a while, just give it a little tap, wham, just like that. It looks like from the bottom, that trout or that salmon says, holy cow, I don't have to work. I'm going to go right up and grab this and come right back down and have a full belly. I don't have to waste any energy, no calories. I always tell people the trout are smart one way. They will not work harder for a piece of food than if they will not spend as many calories going to get it as are in that food. So they'll just sit there and wait for the food to come to them, and then they'll come up and hammer it. So there are patterns: injured smell, injured bait fish. And so you don't have to tie those perfect. And some guys, they say, this is not a lie. So we were fishing on a lake that's right near my house here called Ossippee. And we fished 200 yards, just 200 yards trolling. And we caught 45 landlocked salmons in about 2 hours. Every time we went down this one stretch, we caught two, both rods in the boat had salmon on them, all keepers. And we were 10 feet from shore in 5 feet of water. It was about 45 degrees. And the coloring of the flies we used were just what those fish wanted that day. We went back the next day, same weather, same everything, same fly, nothing, not even we could have put dynamite in there and blown up, and we would have never saw a fish. So it in the end, it's up to them, but it's got to look like what they're seeing. If it's bright out in the States, we fish bright flies. If it's dark, we fish dark flies. That seems to work. But in the end, it's up to them. So
Can I just make an observation, which is that the materials that we use today and the hooks we use today are completely different to what Carrie Stevens had. And you got to bear in mind also what I was listening to you talking about the size of the head and let's say the finish on the flies. Actually, she tied most of her stuff by hand in the hand. So we didn't have vices like we do today. They used jeweler's vices. If she was wealthy, she would have used a jeweler's vice. Otherwise, big hooks were easy to tie in the hand. And so I think a lot of the finish was to do with the fact that we didn't have, she didn't have Danville threads at 20-aught and stuff like that. So the materials that she was trying to tie, well, not trying to, the materials that she was using to tie them were totally different to what we have in our palette today. And yeah.
You're right. That if you take a saddle from the 80s, the stems on the saddles are so much thicker than they are today. They've bred those birds down. They were running around taking feathers out of pillows and using them for their streamers up there. There are some flies that their guides, their stories, and they call them pillow flies, and they would just take them out, slap them on, very effective. But that's exactly it. We have the luxury of having kind of more engineered materials. The hooks are nicer, and they give you more consistency. She never knew if she was going to get the same color floss. The dye lot might be slightly different every time. So and she has some flies that she named a lot of flies after military people that were friends of her husband. Was a guy, and you would see the military person was a captain, then a major, then a general, and they all, or a colonel, and they all got she changed the fly as the rank went on, and you would notice the materials actually changed. And it was, it's a history lesson when you look at it, because the materials she got more materials, more consistency in the materials. And even today, like I said, some of the capes that I get, I pray I'm going to get that same color back. I know I'm never going to get it. It's never going to be exact. They can't reproduce the dye lot, but.
Yeah, so my goal is to tie an injured one first.
I think that's quite easy, Alois. It's all you have to do is take a really beautiful fly that Scott's tied and then just hit it a few times, and then it's injured.
And one thing that's these are beautiful flies. Everybody likes them, but the old standard bucktail flies are, they're sometimes more effective than these feather wing flies. We have a fly here that there's a company here in Maine called LL Bean, and their original owner had a fly. It had a white belly, bucktail belly. It had a green, like forest green, bucktail wing, and then it had like 6 peacock curls on the top, and it had a silver body. Real basic, nothing big. That hammers fish. And I bet you there's no one that really even ties that, because it's such an old fly. New material come out, everyone jumps to the new material. Oh, look at that. YouTube, it's gotta work, you know? Well, maybe the guy who's tying it on YouTube got it free, so he's tying to keep the free stuff.
Yeah.
But some of the old white and red, you know what a daredevil lure is? Well, they have a bucktail fly that's red and white and silver body, and it's deadly. So,
Cool.
other questions?
I was wondering about the hook length. I mean, because I just wondered, could you tie on a shorter hook and leave
Yes.
the setting long? Yeah.
Yeah, so, well, you wouldn't want to have the feather extend much more than maybe a 1/2 inch beyond the bend of the hook, because you would have a lot of short strikes. They hit the front, and then they might hit the back of it, and they wouldn't bite into the hook area. So the longest hook that I tie on single hook is the Carrie Stevens 10X. If I want to do a really longer fly, then I use the tandem. 2 wet fly hooks, a 4 in the front, a 6 in the back, a wire that holds them together. I can get that one longer. But this fly I tied on a 9X so you could see it better. But when I tie this to fish with, I tie it on a 7X. So it's a little shorter. The bait fish here are going to be anywhere from 4X to 7X. The smelt are going to be longer. And then we have these fish that we call chubs. And the chubs, they can be like 7 or 8 inches long. And when we tie flies like that, we use the tandem and we call them jumbos. They're like 7 inches, but they're almost like the cat toys that the saltwater guys tie, those big fluffy cat toys that they tie. It's long and you troll them deep, and you can't cast them because they'll foul under your when you got the line in the air. So
when you're dressing a tandem, do you leave the rear hook plain, or do you still put a silver?
Yeah, so the tandems, hang on one sec. You can tell that I was a teacher, because one of the things that I try to do is when I'm going to teach a tandem class at the show in Marlboro, a demonstration. So I don't know if you can see this real good, but that's how you build a tandem. So you can see on that rear hook, it's got a copper on it, and then I've got the beads in the middle. The beads on the line, they're going to push a lot of water. It's going to make a lot of kind of like current go around that, and it makes the feathers move. And then the front on this one is copper as well. Sometimes it's floss, and a lot of times it's ribbed floss, and sometimes it's just solid copper or silver. And then the wings are built, and I always tie my tandems with both hooks down. Some tandems are tied with a hook up in the back, and the hook is down in the front. And what we found with the up and down was that when the salmon came and hammered the front of the hook, because they love to injure the fly, so they'll come and hit it, and you just have to set your feet and breathe. Just be patient, because then it's going to come around and take the fly from the rear, and you're going to catch it. But with the hook up in the back, when they hammered the front, that back hook would swing and catch them right in the eye. And they're not healthy. They can't take much of a beating. The salmon really cannot. If you make a hole in their mouth, they will actually try to heal that hole in their mouth, and they'll stop developing the rest of their body, and they'll use all their energy to heal that. Sometimes you'll catch them and you'll see they look all dysfunctional, and then you'll see that they had a hole in their. And so we really try to limit the chances of hurting the fish. But the brook trout, if a brook trout, they wouldn't care. They won't hit the front. They'll just come up and suck the whole thing right down, and then hold on. Set your feet. That's the key. You're going to lose a lot of salmon. You're going to lose a lot of brook trout, because you got to have your feet set. When you have a big fly like this, you're going to have a big fish in it. So the long, that was a long answer to yes, we do put, the hooks aren't bare in the back.
Thank you very much.
How long is
And-
that fly now you tied in centimeters?
Meters, we do inches over here.
I know, but I don't have any.
Let me tell you how many inches. About 3 inches long.
So
Well,
7.5 centimeters roundabout.
Yeah, you just want to be, if you're going to cast it, like you like pike flies, right? So there's a great pattern that we call the electric perch, and it's chartreuse grizzly. So it's dyed really, really, really bright green grizzly, and it's got orange. It's got like an orange hot spot in the front and a little bit of a white belly, and then it's got a nice silver tinsel body, and it's an electric perch, and salmon and pike, pickerel, they don't like perch. Salmon hate them because they will eat their babies. So there's a pattern called the Barn Special out of Maine, and it looks like a perch. You put that in the water in Maine, and good night, Irene. They will come after that fly, the salmon, because they attack it because they want to kill it, because they know it eats their babies. But if you're casting it else, you don't want to have this wing because if you make your wing too long, after you cast it, that's what it's going to look like in the water.
Yeah.
And then it's going to spin, and your arm's going to be in great shape because you're going to be casting and bringing it in and fixing the fly, and that's why a lot of streamers have bucktail underneath the wing, and it kind of holds that wing up and it keeps it from following.
Okay, so this is mainly a trolling fly.
This one I would cast, but it would be I'd make it on a 7XL. Yeah.
Okay.
Scott, I was asked a question yesterday. What are the best type of hackles or capes to use for salt water?
So these Ewing ones are often used as deceiver, what they call deceiver patches. And that's over here, we have a fly called the Deceiver. It's a saltwater fly. These would work good. Whiting makes some that are equally as good. Sometimes it's a challenge to find good hackle. So you really, and the shops around here, some of the feather companies have really put the heat on them and said, if you don't buy this many, we're not going to sell them to you. They want a minimum order of so much, and some of these fly shops they can't handle that. They just can't handle they don't have the cash to pay out ahead of time. So there are, I would say the most expensive ones out there are whiting ones. And then there are, and they have a saltwater line. Here's another company, Hairline. These are not Hairline. They sell them. So these are coming from, typically when you get a saltwater cape, see how long the feathers are? They're really long, they're wide, and they're webby. And over here, so you can get them from, all the shops like Hairline and Wapsie, and they will sell somebody else's feathers under their name, but there's only a few groups out there that breed them. It's a lot of work to do that. I just had I don't know if I have it right here. The badger feathers have become almost extinct. People can't find them. And a lot of the feather companies are, their birds, they've just used up all their badger birds, and they take about maybe 2 years to get them to the point where they're really good to sell. And so the Ewing guys, I said to them, look, why don't you try to breed some badgers for me? And they did. I just got one cape the other day, and they said they're one molt away from having so many badger, they won't know what to do with it. So, and badger feathers are often used in saltwater flies too, and they're a lot long. So they Ewing, obviously whiting, they have a whole line of saltwater. Mets, not so much. Their feathers have been shorter. Then Hoffman, and a lot of it is the colors that they want to dye it. There's a guy up in New York, Charlie Collins. He's got some of the original Catskill eggs. All his birds are real natural colors. He doesn't dye anything orange or anything like that. So he's not really dyeing many of the birds there. Most of them are just natural colors. So, but the saltwater guys, they love the ones like I showed you, the lavender, the chartreuse. They have a fly here called a flat wing, where they put the wings right on top of the fly, lay it right on top, and that thing gets in the water, in the salt water, and it's just moving back and forth. And we have striped bass and bluefish over here, and they go crazy over them.
Here, master. I already tried some.
There you go. There you go. You're all I would say is about half the size of that shoulder. You don't want that shoulder to overtake the fly. But that's a good looking. You're good. You're on a start right there.
Yeah, but the saddles or the capes you talked about, you can't compare them with normal saddle schlappen, isn't it? Or can't you?
The schlappin's different. It's the schlappin's from the side of the cape. So typically the schlappin's way over here. They used to cut it off and chuck it, and then they started going, whoa, wait a minute, we can sell this stuff. And same with on the dry fly capes, not the saddles, but the whole neck. They have a bunch of feathers that are good for tails. They're stiffer, and they used to chuck them off too, and now they sell them, so.
We get a lot of these Chinese capes. Are you familiar with those, Scott?
Look, the Chinese capes were originally, that's what probably Carrie Stevens was using when she was
Yeah.
signing.
It just strikes me that these have got a lot of hackles that would be suitable for these streamers, and of course they're nothing like the price of a genetic cape.
Right. Yeah, you can. I mean, some people spend over here in the States, $65 to $80 on a cape. This one, these Ewing ones, they're like about $24.
Yeah.
You know, they're reasonable. There's always a premium and there's always the lower end. I can remember I still have a ton of the Indian capes. You could always tell that because when you open them, they smelled awful. They were the worst smelling things in the world.
Yeah, so does this Chinese one. Stink.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
At least it's got no bugs in it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and these are just, you know, the grizzly feathers that we have for streamers were originally Rhode Island rock chickens. They were roosters running around somebody's pen, and they started, you know, the stories of the Catskill tires actually breeding. They were, you know, using the birds to get eggs, and they would go out and they would pluck feathers off the bird and then leave the bird, let the feathers grow back, and they would go to another bird and pick off feathers. And they never killed the bird because it was a dual purpose bird. They were getting, you know, the roosters were mating with the hens, and the hens were giving them the eggs, and they want to kill off the roosters, but they pluck their feathers for flies. So it's crazy.
Anybody else got any questions?
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for time for us, Scott.
Not
Thank
every
you,
day.
Scott. Very
Very
good.
much. Good evening.
Thank you very much, Scott. Excellent.
Thank you,
It's not every
Scott.
day that I get to go in front of the international crew.
Yeah, looking for that book.
Oh yeah, I will send you the, as soon as I get off, I'll put it on the WhatsApp.
Yes,
And,
please.
and there's, I'll put, there's 3 books. There's one, Herb Welch, The Black Ghost. There's a book on him. It's not as good as this. And then there's another book, it's kind of hard to find. It's Klausmeyer wrote it, and he's got some patterns, some streamer patterns in there, some traditional ones in there that are kind of, they're good. And he's got a step-by-step, and you can never have enough. Everybody, and there's not one way to do this. I should have said that at the beginning. The pattern police that are out there that will, the minute you post a fly, you know, have some comment make. There's many ways to skin a cat when it comes to tying a streamer or any fly. And you know, if you're trying to reproduce the traditional way, okay, and you're trying to teach somebody the traditional way, all right, we'll go that. But like Mark said, they're modern materials, hooks, and you start to change. You can become much more efficient at tying flies with the newer materials.
Well, you've given us 2 really interesting tips tonight. The shingling method, where you're tying it on in steps to keep it secure, and the little tip with tying in the tinsel, so that you've got
like
the
that.
tinsel in exactly the right place. That's a cracking little tip, that is.
Yeah, and if you watched how I did it, I didn't say it, but when I make the little fold in the tinsel, I always know just about where I want that tinsel to end, the waist. So I never have to take my scissors out and cut it.
Yeah.
You know, so the only one that I run a little long is the embossed, because if you end it right where your thread's gonna end, you're almost guaranteed that you're gonna cut your thread because the edge is rough.
Yeah.
So I have a little bit of a tag, and then I just wiggle it, work it off.
Good.
Let me know if you ever want me to come back. I'm more than willing to do anything. And if you're running a fundraiser and need a couple flies, just give me a little notice. It takes a while for stuff to go across the pond, but I'd be happy to donate anything that you need. Just speak up.
Thanks,
Scott,
Scott.
go.
Thank you. Have a good night. Merry Christmas.
And you, Scott.
Thank you a lot, Scott. Very interesting.
Thank you, Scott.
You got to get a better thread rack, Elvis.